All right, what's up, family? Now, the catalyst for this video came about because of two individuals who I will call trolls. They appear frequently in the comment section of my videos. The first troll goes by the username The King, and the other goes by the username Be Active. The King believes that the music that is made in America by Black Americans should always be credited to Africa. Be Active is under the impression that because certain rhythms that I talk about, like the Bo Diddley rhythm and the 3-3-2 rhythm, since they have roots in Africa, he's saying that Black Americans can't claim those rhythms. They are not FBA rhythms. All right? So let's take a look. I'm going to give you an example of some of the comments they leave in the comment section of my videos. Now, here's a conversation that Be Active is having with the King, because they're always in my comments trying to shoot stuff at me, and then they talk amongst themselves. So listen to what he says. Exactly. When Caribbeans and Latinos talk about Latin elements and the Latin rhythms, the first thing the FBAs will say, there's no such thing as a Latin rhythm because it was created in Africa, which by using their logic or using that logic, it means that the FBAs can no longer claim music rhythms because the drum rhythm was created in Africa, which means that the FBAs are not the creators. Now, you see how idiotic that sounds? Now, while it is true that a lot of our rhythms have some roots in Africa, but it's not true that all rhythms that were created in America come from Africa, i.e., the swing rhythm. That is not an African rhythm, but it was created by African Americans. Another example, the funk rhythm. It may have roots in Africa, but the funk rhythm does not appear in Africa. It appears in America because it was created by Black Americans in America. So it's an idiotic statement. This is the kind of nonsense you got to deal with these people. Let's try another one. Music originated from Africa. So yes, that's in response to another thing. Then he goes on to say, African hymns was around before European hymns because the Bible is an African Bible. So I guess Europeans got it from Africans. So with this guy, everything comes from Africa. I believe the top one, I guess I cut it off, is probably from The King, too, to Everlast 12,000. Show me any Black American genre of music that has no African roots. Here we go again. Okay? He goes on to talk to a guy named Randit. African culture is second to none. All right, let's try one more. This is a response to the video I did on the Spanish tinge and about the fiddle playing. And he writes, the fiddle, the violin, etc., are all African instruments. So Africa was the first teacher. Now, let's be clear. The fiddle in Africa didn't look nothing like the fiddle in Europe. By the time they got to the New World, certainly there was some cross-pollination in terms of how to play this four-string instrument that was not available in Africa at that time. Of course, the Africans had a certain rhythm that they taught the Europeans once they got to America. So again, you got to allow for some influence. Everything can't be black and white, Africa, Africa, Africa. But this is what these guys constantly push. Now, during one of our back and forths, right, I sent him a link to a video where it talked about how the different types of African people lost a lot of their language on the way to the New World, at least to the United States. And so they had to develop a new language. We know that as AAVE. Now, I asked him to just think about how the music was created. It was created through the same process. Over time, our music developed into what it is today. It is not African music, nor is it European music. It's a music style that was developed by Black Americans in America. So this is what I say. When I say that this music is ours and ours alone, what I mean to say is that no other group helped us create this music. It doesn't matter what the influences are. It doesn't matter what the root of it is. If it doesn't exist in Africa and it doesn't exist in Europe, then it is our music and our music alone.
Slave descendants have a unique linguistic heritage in comparison to every other immigrant group that came to this country. African slaves, when they were captured, were often isolated linguistically from others that spoke their own mother tongue while they were on the west coast of Africa. That linguistic isolation was also maintained on the ships during the Atlantic crossing. And as a result of that, not one indigenous African language has survived the Atlantic crossing intact. Once they got here, it was illegal to teach them to read and write. For hundreds of years, slaves were denied access to education. And as a result of that, many of the linguistic stereotypes, many of the negative linguistic stereotypes that people embrace regarding African American English, dismissing it as, the language of someone who's being lazy or not attending to language, doesn't fully appreciate the linguistic isolation that slave descendants experienced is unlike anything of any other immigrant group in this country.
When they were brought here, African Americans were segregated into plantations. That's what happened in the Caribbean also. And what they did was to invent new languages, new varieties, taking linguistic properties from the surrounding varieties and creating new forms. These are creations of people put in an absolutely horrible set of circumstances. And out of that milieu came new language forms.
I hope you can imagine by the same process language was developed. It's not hard to imagine the music was developed in the same way. It is not African music. It's not European music. It's a music form, or should I say music forms, uniquely African American or Black American. I want you to pay attention to how these two narrators talk about the emergence of gospel music and the effect that it had on the European. They described it as something strange but unique and new, never seen before.
Gradually, even as early as the 1800s, this enthusiasm begins to affect white congregations. As a matter of fact, in the 1800 revival, we began to see an exchange of singing between the slaves and the white Methodists and Baptists and Presbyterians. And this was the cause for an 1819 book by John Fanning Watson called The Methodist Era, where he chastises them for singing like those songs that were first composed in the colored community, he calls it. Not only were they frightened because it was new, they were frightened because it was different, and they were slightly angry because something that was so important to them, something that was so necessary to their own expression, had come from a group that really oughtn't to have had the sense to create this and to bring it.
The white commander of a black regiment during the Civil War has written a marvelous evocation of the singing of the spirituals by the black troops, particularly around the campsite at night, and how moving he found this music, which he also found to be strange and filled with a kind of pathos that was unlike any music that he had heard before.
Now that photo reminded me of the 54th Regiment. Y'all seen that movie Glory? Y'all remember this?
He packed in the animals 2 by 2, ox, camel, and a kangaroo. Packed him in that ox so tight, I couldn't get no sleep that night. Roll the sun, Shep and him, tell him about God's master plan. Oh, my Lord, 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 Lord. Oh, my Lord, 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 Lord.
Oh, I came to Joburg, the golden city. Oh, why did I come here for? I'm a long way from home in Joburg City, so far away from my throne. Oh, a man with slick jaws from Joburg City. He was the man that I loved. He bought me jewels and clothes to spare and stole my heart away. Now I'm sad and lonely, for I loved him more.
Now you might be thinking this is from a Harlem nightclub during the 30s and 40s, but you would be mistaken. This is 1949 South Africa. And that might come, a shock to many people because these people actually sound like us. You see how powerful Black American culture is. And there's a reason why they sound like this. Listen.
Despite the British efforts to avoid it, an urban black society was rapidly emerging. As I briefly mentioned in the beginning of this video, African American culture played an enormous role in influencing the culture and leisure activities of urban South Africans. This wasn't the first time that the USA had played a role in influencing South African culture. Vaudeville groups had been touring the country since the late 19th century. But this is the first time that recordings of American music can be bought, sold, distributed, played, replayed, and learned in an urban setting. And there was much to aspire to across the Atlantic. Although by no means equal to white Americans, African Americans had far more rights and freedoms than their South African contemporaries. Early American jazz artists such as the Mills Brothers and Duke Ellington were emulated by South African musicians as their music became synonymous with a better standard of life.
But they all pretty much use the 1-4-1-5 progression. You can almost think of it as like the African American blues. Think about how many melodies that have been written over the blues. Sunny Moon for 2, Straight No Chaser, Blues for Gwen, Now's the Time. Well, for us, it's pretty much the same thing, except we use the 1-4-5 progression. South African music has a rather large history, and this comes through in the music. But in my very youthful music career, what I have found that has really stood out for me is how South African musicians have always been enthusiastic about African American jazz. And I have my own theories about it, and I can back them up. We've had much criticism about being obsessed with bebop and just the American culture in general. I mean, how could you not? It's always in our faces. But I think it's more than that. This sort of imitation and interest in African American style can be looked at from as early as the Manhattan Brothers in the 1950s. The Manhattan Brothers were a group of 4 male singers, sort of like singers in closed harmony style.
Manhattan Brothers, siyanibulisa nonke nina bantu belizwe lase-Afrika.
And they were said to be really interested in American vocal groups like the Ink Spots, the Mills Brothers. They particularly loved the Mills Brothers. In fact, their goal was to imitate them exactly. Louis Radebe Peterson, their first professional accompanist, stated once in an interview that whenever a record would come out, they would buy it and he would painstakingly sit at the piano and try to figure out exactly what these groups were doing, and so as to imitate them exactly. Even their style, even their way of dress, the way that they sang, this is what they wanted to do. South Africa is very interesting. It's like being African for a long time is sort of like, it's not a cool thing. When you sort of imitate styles from abroad, you almost are elevated. And I think that is the reason for a lot of their success, is because they were able to imitate these American groups so well. Of course, over time, they did get some criticism because it was like they were going overseas and then they would sing what Americans were singing. And obviously, you cannot do a style that is not your own and expect to do it better than the people who were born there. But the point here that I'm trying to make is that we can't really talk about South African jazz particularly without talking about the huge interest that we've always had with African American songs. And this brings me to this idea of Black solidarity, which this idea I got from another South African musician who I asked about this topic, and he told me that for him it's solidarity. It's seeing us in them. We are all Black people, and the music speaks to us. The music is home. There's something about the way that other Black people play, particularly African Americans, something in the way in which they put their music together that sort of speaks to us. We are all Black. There's nothing different. It's just a different part of the diaspora.
Now just think about it. If you close your eyes, you would probably have thought that these were Black Americans. This is the influence of Black American culture, not only in Africa, but around the world. I gotta keep saying this. We actually gave the world more than they actually gave to us. Yet you have people from the diaspora trying to tell us that everything that we created in America should be attributed to Africa. That's pure nonsense. I will never accept that. Just because I'm a descendant of African people don't mean I gotta attribute everything to Africa. This is the way it is. So listen, if this is your first time on this channel, welcome. Take a minute to subscribe. Definitely thumb up the video. Please share this information. It's so important. Until the next time, peace.
In the freezing winters of early 20th century New Jersey, one visionary woman dared to dream of a safer, more efficient way to heat homes. Her name was Alice Parker. At a time when most homes relied on dangerous coal or wood-burning fireplaces that posed fire risks and required constant labor, Alice knew there had to be a better way. Inspired by her own struggles to stay warm during harsh winters, Alice designed a revolutionary natural gas-powered furnace that could heat homes evenly and efficiently. In 1919, Alice H. Parker became one of the first Black American women to receive a U.S. patent for her invention, a groundbreaking achievement in an era dominated by white men. Her system used natural gas to distribute warm air through ducts into individual rooms, introducing the concept of zone heating that is still used in modern HVAC systems today. Her contributions are celebrated through awards like the Alice H. Parker Women Leaders and Innovation Award, honoring her as a pioneer in engineering and heating technology.